that we started with this simple chant of Shalom, of peace, of wholeness at our first class. And we'll keep doing this for a few classes, maybe mix it up a little more later, but it's always good to start learning with a song or a chant. So just invite you to settle in, and you can direct this chant to yourself, your own inner being. You can include others you know, others you don't know. You can just more generally send it out into the world from oral and beyond, whatever you would like to do. Shalom. 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 Welcome back, everyone. So you can set those sheets about rabbinic theology aside for now. And so I guess maybe we'll just do a quick intro welcome. We'll welcome Carol and invite you to introduce yourself, which I think that which everyone else did in the class at an earlier stage, but just what was it, sort of like a tiny bit about your background with Jewish learning, and if you had a bat mitzvah or not or something, and then what you're hoping to learn from this multi-month experience.
Okay, so I converted to Judaism in 2009, and I took 2 years of the Florence Malcolm Jewish studies before that. Not that I'm an expert at any of that, but I learned about the different ways of looking at things from the different sections of Judaism, different practices, conservative, out of one, and such. And then I decided to convert and took a class with the 4 denominations of Judaism and converted on Purim of 2009. And I'm taking the class to basically deepen my knowledge and potentially, I've never been bar mitzvah, but potentially do that, but I'm not sure if I would be able to do it given the Hebrew, but I'll try. I just pulled out all my books yesterday.
Great, thank you. Welcome.
But I have that from Hebrew.
What's that?
I did study some Hebrew. I studied with Eleanor Weinglass, and then with Orthodox Traditional School, and then I practiced in the conference room at work, and then I don't know, somehow I missed like the last part of Shalom book, so I'm rusty on those consonants, so that's what you do. So they involve the T and something, anyway,
Yeah,
and then it's two,
great,
okay, Coke is in there too.
thank you. Good, so, we're gonna spend our first, bit of class, finishing an important section from last time that we didn't get to talk about. Could someone run and just close the door, or take the, this
Yep.
thing? Great, so hopefully you have your sheets from last week. If I have I have an extra, if a couple extras, people. Brian, can you pass this?
I'll do it down to it.
And
Thank you.
so last time, right, we looked at this whole a good chunk of text from the whole burning bush story, and so there's this last a long kind of long comment, number 3, that is about this new divine name that is shared with Moses. And as just to refresh kind of what we were talking about a little bit last time, is we were trying to get, I was using this metaphor of like the layer cake in terms of approaching Torah, of like there's the biblical layer, there's then the layer of the early and later rabbis, which includes then like medieval layers, then there's modern and then contemporary layers of reading Torah. And as we've been looking at this text, what I'm trying to help us do is to get at the biblical layer, meaning how was this understood, by our biblical ancestors without all of the layers of rabbinic interpretation, right? It's hard when, normally when we study Torah, we're kind of jumping around in the different layers, but we're trying to kind of disaggregate those for the sake of this learning. And so who got to read the ark? The front of the Oseh ark. Okay, I saw Stacey's hand first. What do you remember? What is it?
I forgot immediately.
Right. You don't have it in front of you.
I was able to sound it.
It was just 2
Yeah,
words.
Adonai,
Yeah, it was
a share in combination,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
But I don't recall
What was
the,
that?
it was like Adonai,
It was like-
a share, Adonai,
Yeah,
Adonai, a share.
Yeah.
So you're right about the Asher, and so the first part,
No.
not exactly, but did anyone else get to look at it?
Where, I could have just.
Did we get the assignment in that?
I sent it, I said, not really.
Oh,
Don't
okay. We
worry
were
about it.
confused about the,
I just
Because it
assumed it was Adonai because I
it
couldn't
was
quite figure out.
Aleph,
Yes.
Right, it was Aleph,
Tav,
Hey,
Hey,
Yud,
Yud,
Hey.
Yes.
It was what you have from our text right here, which
Oh, wait. I'll pay you.
which is a little bit hard for me to point out to, because these unfortunately, I'm still, it is on that one, but I'm not yet a total master at
Okay.
creating Safaria source sheets. And so it like removed the verse numbers. So I can't like direct you to which verse it is. Depends on how it's broken down, like this line is like, it's
Well, just
different.
on the.
It's about,
Vayom
one-
said.
it's a, like 10 lines up from the bottom.
And what
Okay.
page?
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Oh, because.
Where it says, Vayomer Elohim El Moshe,
Is that in the first place?
Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh.
Yeah. Is that how you pronounce? So that's the I am.
Oh, right, so it's and
I am, yeah, but can you say that again?
Yeah, well, first, do you see it, did you see it in the,
line is it?
No.
here, let me find, here, I just kind of, did you guys find it? No.
Yeah. I don't find the.
10.
Five.
Oh, it's on the, there, no.
Why would you say Vayom?
Okay,
Other
good point.
Vayomers,
There.
Vayomer as he said.
So, okay, so in this larger print, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines up from the top.
But
On the
which
second
are
page.
you
On the
referring-
on the second page of the Hebrew, sorry.
Not for the bottom.
7 lines from the bottom.
It's here,
Yes.
I see it.
okay,
I'm missing a page, but maybe not.
and,
Oh, yeah, I see it. Okay.
oh, that's the,
share.
that's the whole, yeah,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I see it,
it's the whole, it's both of them.
yeah.
I
There's
see
just-
it here.
sorry, these all like printed differently. Here it is.
Okay, Vayomer, yeah.
Yeah.
Vayomer Elohim El Moshe.
Okay,
Oh,
so
here
you
it is.
pronounce it
Yeah,
as,
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
Ehyeh,
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
eh,
Oh,
oh,
Yeah,
eh,
yeah, I share, I share.
Uh-huh.
eh,
I was saying.
Yeah.
and so Moses has just asked God, right from the bush, it's now not an angel, it's God's voice is speaking to Moses. Moses says, well, what's your name? What do I tell the children of Israel that I'm supposed to take out of Egypt? Like, what do I tell them is your name? And this is the response. Vayomer Elohim, which is kind of a more general, a more general name for God. Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. And so that is what's written on the ark, those, I think, 3 times, right? Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. And as we're gonna see, you were on the right track with just reading with triggering you to read it as Adonai because it's from the same root, which we're gonna read in this commentary now. Okay, I think we can do the commentary. Okay, so this is commentary number 3.
I am.
Let's see, Sharon and Tiana and Deborah, is there any way we can invite you to turn on your videos and kind of, because we're happy for you to unmute and ask questions and that's why we don't have this $2,000 webcam so that we can look at each other. We want to look at you and include you in the experience.
but no pressure.
But no pressure. If you are indisposed or really not up for it, I won't berate you. Okay, so would let's see, would someone, so we're at this third commentary here. And this is like a really, this is a really foundational thing for not just biblical theology, but Jewish theology really in general, but this is kind of the root level of sort of the ground floor level of where it first appears and kind of. This is one biblical scholar's take on the basic biblical meaning of what's going on here. There's other people who would argue with him, but this is one take on it. So would someone read this?
I'll do it.
Okay, I might interrupt you a little bit, but
This phrase has been translated, I am that I am who I am, and I will be what I will be. It clearly evokes, what do I say for that?
so, yeah, so we, Yud He Vav He, or you could say Adonai, or you could say Hashem.
Okay. It clearly evokes Adonai, the specific proper name of Israel's God, known in English as the Tetragrammaton,
Yes, yeah,
the four consonants.
in Greek, right?
Ah.
Tetra meaning four, I think, and grammaton meaning consonants. Right, the four-letter name that we conventionally pronounce Adonai.
Okay. The phrase also indicates that the earliest recorded understanding of the divine name is as a verb derived from a stem meaning to be.
Right, so He Vav He is the Hebrew root. Because Hebrew is a root-based language, so that generally has three consonants at the root that are then have different prefixes or declensions or both to put them into different tenses. And I think it's gonna go on to explain that a little bit more. But yeah, keep going.
Because it is the sound of wind and breath, the way in which we sense the invisible, it could express the quality of absolute being, the eternal, unchanging, dynamic essence. Or it could mean, I have a tickle, so it causes to be.
Adonai is the third person masculine singular. Ehye,
Yeah, anyway.
Ehye is a corresponding first person singular.
Right, so I mean, this is more obviously advanced Hebrew, but the Aleph is the first person marker. That's why I say so that is you can get three English words from four Hebrew letters. It's kind of cool. Right, that word Ehyeh, in English, you have to make it into three words. That's the Aleph marker gives the I sense, and hey, I will be. But just the regular name of God, the Yud He Vav He, that Yud is third person masculine, or like, but Hebrew doesn't have a neuter. It's there's not a non-gendered it's either one or the other. Does that all make sense so far? At a basic level, but do you want to ask something?
No.
Like, could you make it clearer, or
No, it's okay.
okay?
On the part then that says, right?
I will be,
I will be.
and then the asher is what they're translating as that or who or which. I will be who I will be, or I will be what I will be.
That's pretty I mean, the like Yud He Vav He versus, Ehyeh, like, that's cool.
It says because it's the sound of wind and breath. Is that because of when you say it?
The hey vav hey ha va ha ha, those sound, they're all ha va ha. They're not, they're all kind of breathy consonants. It's not a kuf or a resh or a lamed or something like that. It has this kind of breathy quality that Rabbi Arthur Waskow likes to translate the Yud He Vav He as the breath of life. For that reason, because those consonants have this particular breathy quality. Okay. Can we go on? Kelly, up for finishing the paragraph there?
Where do we leave?
After the.
Singular? The latter is used here because name giving in the ancient world implied the wielding of power over the one named. Hence, the divine name can proceed only from God. God reveals to Moses a name symbolizing the help needed for his task, without offering a real name, which would put God under human control.
I think that, but they're like, it's kind of a it's kind of an enigmatic response that God gives to Moshe. I think that's part of what he's like. It's not quite really offering Moses like the real name necessarily. And so it's kind of like, well, I will be what I will be. Yeah.
When God says that, I am that I am who I am, I will be what I will be. I don't know, I've interpreted that to be, his powers, like, God can be great, but God can also be punishing.
Yeah, and that's then, so that's a great example of then like the kind of later of a late, how we then add on the different meaning. You could see, you could then find like a rabbinic commentary or something that could say something very similar to that. But right now, I just want us to like get at the sort of literal sense is just I will be, or I will be that I will be, and it's weird. It's not like God is not giving him a straight answer.
Right.
Like that's pretty clear. It's an enigmatic answer, and it's also and it's linked with it's directly linked with this verb to be. In fact, or this is the only place in the entire Bible where they actually give some kind of explanation of the Yud He Vav He. Because the Yud He Vav He, the general consensus is that that comes from this root of He Vav He. But when you put the Yud in front of that, it becomes, it's not a normal conjugation. Yihye would be the normal, like it will be. Like we say in Adon Olam, v'hu haya v'hu hoveh v'hu yihye v'tifara, right? In that line, this is why this is also cool and foundational, which you guys have all sang, I don't know how many times, right? The poet who composed Adon Olam he's riffing on the same being quality of the Yud He Vav He. Hu haya, he or it was. Hu hoveh, here it is. Hu Yihye, here it will be. All from. And then. Just with the yud, when you have the yud hey vav hey, it's like all of those tenses combined. The was, is, and the will be, because it's not. Like ehye is a normal conjugation of I will be. That's actually still how you say it in modern Hebrew. But the yud hey vav hey is like a is not a. It's a multiple. It's not a single conjugation of that root. Yeah.
I don't, it just called to mind something I read sometime. And it came out of a spot Kabbalah, I think. That's one of the commentaries was that the Yud Hey Vav Hey was about the now, the sustainer of the now. In other words, we're all here now, along with everybody in the world, just experiencing this moments and these moments strung together that we're here. That is the divine.
Yeah, and that's like, and so that's like just another, what you just said is just kind of another riff on what the commentator here said, it could express the quality of absolute being, the eternal, unchanging, dynamic presence, like that. Yeah. Right, and so what I want you guys to get is like that is all there at this kind of root level of this text in the Torah. But yeah, that's a perfect, I mean, that's kind of just putting that into slightly different, somewhat different words. What
maybe it was Chaim Batel. Didn't he write it down?
That would be way too simplistic for a Chaim Batel, but
yeah. That's true.
So, would someone read the next paragraph?
During the Second Temple period, the Tetragrammaton came to be regarded as charged with sanctity and magical potency. Therefore, its pronunciation ceased.
Right, and that's this whole kind of, so the Second Temple period, I think starts at like 520s or something. Like the first temple is destroyed in 586. It's then rebuilt. You can look it up on Google. It's like 520s or something. And earlier, like at other, it seems like in the first temple period that this name was pronounced. It's even part of different people's names, partly people's first names, but for reasons that that I certainly don't know, and I don't think anyone probably really knows, but that probably has different theories. But it came to be no longer pronounced, except during the Second Temple period. It was certainly by the end of the Second Temple period. It's then only pronounced by the high priest on Yom Kippur. You probably heard me talk about this from the Bima or something on Yom Kippur, and when we do our little nod to the service of the high priest on Yom Kippur, that was part of that. At the late Second Temple period, that was like the culmination of Yom Kippur, was the high priest would pronounce the name out loud. But like 600 years before that, they would have been pronouncing the name out loud all the time. But for reasons that are mysterious, we don't really know, that changed. And so then it's replaced. Do you want to continue reading?
Sure. Therefore, its pronunciation ceased. It was replaced in speech by Adonai, Lord.
It's actually literally lords, like the royal we, kind of is the best explanation I've heard for why don't we why don't we say just my Lord, actually, my lords is what it. But, so it has Adon, even in modern Hebrew, Adon is the word for sir. Slicha Adon, Adoni, excuse me, sir, right? That's, so it's like, Lord, sir, that's the resonance at a basic level that Adonai has.
Often the vowels of Adonai would accompany the letters of Yud He Vav He
Right,
in written texts, which gave rise to the mistaken form Jehovah found in some Christian translations.
right, so that they would try to kind of pronounce that from the vowels that of the Adonai vowels that are then put under the Yud He Vav He that you'll see sometime actually fairly regularly. I don't know what it's like in our Chumash, but you'll see that.
The original pronunciation of Yud He Vav He was lost. Modern attempts at recovery, such as Yahweh, are conjectural and have no support from tradition.
Right, so, and then, so after the Second Temple period, that we then did not retain how it was officially pronounced, and so we kind of ceased. This is actually something the Jewish people, one of the things the Jewish people collectively agree on is we don't know how to pronounce, I don't even know the name, as Leonard Cohen says, and if I did, well, baby, what's it to you? Right, so why don't you continue with the last paragraph?
Taken together with the statement in Exodus 6:3, it would appear that the name Yud He Vav He came into prominence only as the characteristic personal name of the God of Israel in the time of Moses. Whether it was known before that time or not is questionable. It is of interest, though, that the various divine names found in Genesis are not used in the later biblical books, except occasionally in poetic texts. The new stage in history of Israelite monotheism begins with the revelation of the divine name Yud He Vav He to Moses.
Okay. Great. So you guys can look up the Exodus 6:3 reference on your own if you want to. So, yeah. Questions, comments, reactions to all of that? Yeah.
Twice this commentator talks about like a new monotheism. So were the Jews before that kind of also believing in other gods too?
So how do I answer this question?
If it's not for today, that's fine.
Yeah, certainly, so speaking from like a biblical scholarly hat kind of perspective, there is a sense that our biblical ancestors recognized and in some cases worshipped other gods, and so that's why we say Micha Mocha Ba'elim Adonai, who is like you, literally means who is like you among the gods.
Okay,
Yud He Vav He.
okay,
That when it appears in the Song of the Sea, that line, that's what it means literally, because of like all of the other gods, you are
okay.
that's what it meant, like that's more like what it would have meant at that time.
Okay.
But what is happening here with this, with Moses's kind of drafting here, is that God is saying, and this has kind of what happens, it's kind of enigmatic also in Exodus 6:3, what he's alluding to is that this divine name Yud He Vav He or Ehyeh this is something kind of new. Moses, that I'm revealing to you.
I see, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
and you know, the Ehieh Asher Ehieh, all that has this quality as well of that from like the I will be, like the quality of becoming, of like this potential. I will be what I will be, and so sometimes like riffing on that name, people will translate that as as like the becoming quality of like this potential evolving nature of the divine. Um,
Is, yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt.
no, yeah,
Is this the first time that God revealed himself to a human and had a discussion with them?
no, I mean, there was the patriarchs, but
Okay.
right, you know, with Abraham and right. But there's something new that's being that yeah, there's something new that's happening here. It's the confusing part is like the Yud Hey Vav Hey name is still used with the patriarchs, but it's not. I think maybe some scholars would say, well, maybe there was that. Maybe this is trying to say that that name wasn't used with them when it just seems like it was in the way we have the biblical text. Or there's like some kind of new power, this power of beingness, of possibility is being revealed to Moses. This is the first time that anything is explained having to do with the being quality of this of God's name. In earlier parts of in Genesis, it's just it's just used, or there'll also be other older God names that are used. That's what his point is now, that the divine names found in Genesis, like El Shaddai, if you've seen that, or El Elyon, those are then not, those fall out of use in the later books of the Torah. So that those may have belonged to kind of like an earlier strata of like the patriarchs, and then now this kind of new quality is being more explicitly revealed to Moses.
It's like he's opening up the dialogue for the stones that at us Shavuot, the commandments, the 10 Commandments. You know, opening up the dialogue to get to that point. Is it doing?
Well, that's coming right after they leave Egypt, right? I mean, that yeah,
So like
kind of.
getting him to follow along with him and work with the people and give them this.
Yeah, I mean, in our text, well, you know, one of the other lovely things about the theology in the text is that they I will, right, that I will be with you, right? Earlier in the text, it's you know, Moses says to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, that I should bring the children of Israel out of Egypt?" And God replies, "Indeed, I will be with you." And so I've always loved. I think it's actually that's the Ehieh. It's another level of the meaning of the Ehieh there, that I will be with you. Yeah, Ehyeh imach, I will be with you. Right, so it's this promise of accompany, there it's like slightly massaged to be more of like accompaniment. I'll be with you. He doesn't say I'm gonna like, at this point, like I'm gonna do all kinds of fireworks and make everything go really well, so you'll want to talk about it at your Passover Seder or something like that. It's just like I will be with you. And then and then there's kind of the further revealing through the Ten Commandments and the whole Sinai experience. First they have to get out of Egypt. Um, uh, so, I mean, there's what I want you to take away from this, there's there's a very mysterious, enigmatic quality to all of this that seems to be related of God's name to the word to be, right? And some people like to point out that God is that there was even a famous book that came out by this name, that God is a verb, right? That the Yud He Vav He, or here also Ehyeh, it's a verb, it's a process, it's not the nature of the Hebrew is not a fixed thing. Ehyeh asher Ehyeh is like a super kind of processy thing. It's not a fixed thing that you can just pin down and grasp. And the Yud He Vav He itself also has that same quality. And this, so we're gonna, I think actually next time we're gonna get into, we're gonna jump forward a couple thousand years into Reconstructionist theology. And one expression of that draws on process theology from the great philosopher Albert North Whitehead. And this will come back. And you'll see this kind of God as process, as motion from the verb form. But this is where it comes from. So just any last kind of comments about or questions about this text, or things that struck you, or things you're noticing?
Just that God's reply to Moses is not one that would allow for building an idol or making God a thing or something out there.
Yeah,
It is a God, as you said, maybe in process.
yeah, I think that's great. No, I think that's
Dynamic.
right. I think that's part of this deep level of the anti-idol orientation of if it's an idol, then it's like, it's got a clear name, it has this is it.
Mhm.
Like, this is, you can,
It's objectified.
yeah, it's it's something you can point to, and this is not something so clearly that you can point to, although it did start with this, in bringing back the second comment about, how God turns up in the brush fire. There is this more abstract or kind of hard to pin down quality of the divine, is still, there's a fire and there's a voice that Moshe is also, that's going along with this, right? But no, I think that's, you're tapping into something that's like very deep, at kind of like the deep Jewish I guess it's not even subconscious, but it's at the very deep level, I think, of the tradition, I would say. Okay. So, now you know everything you need to know about biblical theology. So, check. So now we're gonna, so that was like a little bit of, into the world of biblical theology and connects with some of the Hebrew that you're learning. And like I said, it's gonna come back when we'll do a little bit of process theology next time, or the time after that. Okay, rabbinic theology. So, you'll want your sheets in a moment. So if I were to ask you, what is rabbinic literature, especially early rabbinic literature, what would anyone able to answer that? Would you know what I'm talking about, or would you? The Mishnah, good. Yes, absolutely. That is one classic, right? The Mishnah, which is also known as kind of the oral law, the oral Torah, that was oral, and then for reasons I'm not so clear on, and again, I'm not sure anyone is, but maybe they are, was then written down. I think because it was maybe with all of the Roman persecution disruption stuff, they realized they needed to not just have these traditions transmitted orally, but to write it down. So it was written down around 200 CE. Mishnah, what else?
Gemara.
Yeah, Gemara or the Talmud. The Talmud is made up of the Mishnah and then the Gemara, which is like the commentary, the much more lengthy commentary on the Mishnah. I believe, you could Google it real quick, but I think there are 66 tractates of Talmud. So it's a very, very vast
What's a tractate?
volume, like individual books.
What was the word?
What did I say? Tractate?
Okay.
Yeah, I get Tractate.
Okay.
Don't we use that word in English for other things sometimes? Like,
Remember that.
Usually a political tractate.
yeah, individual volumes that deal, the entire Talmud is a commentary on the Mishnah, but it ventures very far afield, and there's the Babylonian Talmud, which was finished around 500 CE, and then there's the Jerusalem Talmud, probably done around the same time. The Babylonian one is much more authoritative. Okay, those are the two main elements of early rabbinic literature. There's kind of one or two more, one of which, you believe it or not, you all have some familiarity with.
2,000 years of responses.
No, not responsa yet. We don't actually have responsa until like starting in the 900s or so. So that's no longer early. The Sidur.
Ah,
The Sidur is actually, so the Sidur is made up of both biblical texts like Psalms, but then rabbinic, right, or the Shema, or the Shema and the Via Hafta, right, are from Deuteronomy. But then there's things like the Amidah, which was composed by the rabbis, or like on Shabbat, or holidays, we'll say Nishmat Kol Chai, that long, beautiful prayer. That's all rabbinic, and so the Sidur is something of a reflection of biblical theology, but it's whatever it is of biblical theology is heavily curated by the rabbis, plus direct rabbinic theology is there as well. And then the one other sort of genre is midrash, which are which the Talmud is actually has a bunch of midrash in it, but there's also a separate literature of midrash, which is commentary on the Torah, rabbinic readings of verses from the Torah and so forth. And
Something talking.
Yeah, do you want to?
I don't know what triggered it, but I'm getting less than.
what
From
is it?
this?
It's from the owl.
Oh,
Is the
owl.
owl giving me a lecture? It's picking up on your voice, I
And
think.
it's going into her hearing aid.
Going
into my
into your
hearing
hearing
aid.
aid.
I'm getting an interesting lecture, but I don't know where it's from.
You're, okay, I have no idea about that.
It
It's
sounded like
going,
what you were saying, but it was Yeah. a little bit delayed.
well, like,
Oh,
delayed.
I thought it was like a video.
What triggered it? Very bizarre.
Very smart.
There's maybe like, it's like happens to be using the same frequency or something of your hearing aid. I have,
It's not coming from my phone.
That's what I thought it was.
Something got into my ear. I know all about the Babylonian Talmud and the first century CE narratives.
that was what I was talking about.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
okay.
it triggered something that started giving me a lecture.
Oh, that was not me.
No, it was somebody else's voice.
Oh my God, that's
Yeah.
really weird. Okay, well, maybe that was the divine, maybe you're having. Maybe the divine is breaking through into the spirit.
And I took notes from him or her.
I would,
Yeah.
yeah, or,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
or them or it, yes, okay. If, well, so last time I asked you, like, if you were gonna describe the God of the Bible to someone, what would you say? So here, if it's a little harder, probably, if you were to like disentangle, if you're able to kind of isolate what you associate more of rabbinic theology or rabbinic ideas about God.
I don't know enough.
Yeah, anything come to mind? Like, how would you, if you were to describe the God of the rabbis?
Is this where the judgments would come in, the interpretations of the God who, here are the rules. Here's how you're supposed to follow them. And if I still don't know if it's this, if it's the consequences part. Considered rabbinical or not, but
There's lots of consequences in the Torah, certainly, like, I mean, there's lots of laws in the Torah as well. What you then have with, the Mishnah and the Talmud and then further rabbinic interpretations is rabbinic interpretation of biblical law, essentially, of like how, it says keep Shabbat. Well, what does that actually mean? That the Torah, the Bible doesn't tell you very much about what it means to keep Shabbat. And so that's where we have all of this rabbinic, the oral Torah that then became written down, but is still referred, the Mishnah and the Talmud are still referred to really as the oral Torah.
So I was raised Orthodox growing up, and we weren't allowed to drive the car on Friday night, Saturday, whatever.
Right,
The cars didn't come around till the 1900s. So how does that work?
right. So there's two principles involved with, at least two main principles involved with driving. And one is that, according to traditional rabbinic halacha, you're not supposed to travel more than 2,000 cubits on Shabbat. I think it's cubits on Shabbat, because you're supposed to just sort of because you're not supposed to travel. And so, so then, cars facilitated people traveling further, so that would be one element of breaking Shabbat from a traditional perspective. The other one is, and this is actually in the Torah, it says you will not burn any, in Exodus, it says you won't burn any flame throughout your habitations on Shabbat. And so that's why, traditionally you wouldn't turn on a stove on Shabbat, but then, a car is an internal combustion engine. So it lights, you're lighting something in order to get the engine to do some sort of two things.
So I asked my parents and they said that it was because you're not allowed to work and driving is work.
Well, it probably, so this is gonna take us like a little too far.
Okay.
There's a whole, like, the definition of, so what is work, right? That's a huge, you're not supposed to work on Shabbat, the Torah says. Malacha is the word, so then the rabbis, without much seeming basis from what's in the Torah, because the Torah doesn't say very much, then have a vast amount of explication of how do you define work, and that's what, like, huge volumes of the Talmud, the second, the tractate about Shabbat is all about all the different kinds of prohibited labor on Shabbat and so forth. Okay, but so any other thoughts about rabbinic theology, or yeah?
But
Okay,
I can wait.
well, just see if there's anybody else who had. I'm not necessarily, don't feel bad if you wouldn't necessarily be able to
Subject to this
disagree.
interpretation and that interpretation and
Right.
maybe
Yeah.
there's a third interpretation.
Yeah, that's great. That's good. Yeah, actually is right. The multivocality kind of quality of the rabbinic tradition, that there's this opinion and then there's a minority opinion, and there's often different takes on things and different understandings. They'll even, I think this is early rabbinic, they'll say there's 70 faces to the Torah, right? That rabbis, even at the very earliest levels, will be able to interpret a verse in multiple levels, right? So yeah, that's actually a really important piece of that has a lot of theological implications too, that would allow it to not be so fixed, that there could be multiple takes on different things. Yeah, there was one text that I thought about bringing you that I didn't, comes from a collection of Midrash that talks about at Sinai, different people heard God's voice in different ways depending on who they were. Like, some people heard God as like a young warrior. Some people heard, I forget what the other ones were, but they give some different examples, right? That's not something the Torah would say. The Torah would just say, like, the voice sounded and all the people heard and they were, afraid because it's this intense thing. But that kind of multivocality piece, then, the rabbis imagine that theologically happening, but it's based on their same approach to reading the Torah, even though they do, eventually kind of tell you this is what you're supposed to do and this is what you're not supposed to do. Well, I'm gonna walk you through kind of my take on trying to, do rabbinic theology in one session. I called this compassion and imagination. The rabbis were not systematic thinkers in terms of theology, right? I'm talking about the early rabbis here, so from you know, the rabbis were kind of starting to be a thing around the year 0, maybe a little bit before. They kind of grew out of the Pharisees. But then, you know, certainly by 200 CE, they were kind of more of a clear group of people. And their exact beginnings are a little fuzzy. But there were many other Jewish groups at the end of the Second Temple period that included the proto rabbis. They weren't, you know, Jesus was one guy walking around, and then even his followers who then, you know, became the early Christians, you know, and who initially didn't think of themselves as different from Jews, that they were Jews. Was another group, you know, the Dead Sea Scroll community was another group. Those were not the rabbis. Those were like a totally different group of people who had a really different theology, or fairly different theology that I don't know that much about, but who would have been largely lost to us from history, except for the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, you know, just like 75 years ago. But the rabbis eventually kind of won out and became normative, and started to, you know, structure Jewish life and practice. But they didn't think systematically in terms of theology. They were more interested in structuring about what Jews did. Like, this is how you pray. Life, you know, praying 3 times a day, you know, how do you do blessings? How do you keep Shabbat, right? Like the 39 types of work that you avoid on Shabbat, kashrut, you know, and so forth. But they have all kinds of wonderful stories about how they understood and imagined God. And one of the things I've come to feel strongly, part of what I would call the rabbinic, a significant part of the rabbinic project, the theological project, was a kind of sweetening of God, kind of a tempering of, you know, we didn't do that much with the harsh quality of the biblical God figure, but they kind of modified that. They kind of made God warmer and more compassionate, or really tried to bring that quality out and focus on that more. And so that's kind of the general orientation of these texts I'm bringing you. Kind of sweetening the harshness of the biblical God. Can you, from what you know, can you name anything that comes to mind about how the rabbis did this, just from things you've heard over the years? Or there's actually something that probably all of you just did recently that fits into this, believe it or not. But
The Seder?
Like feeling when you do the wine and you first feel bad that, you know, God doesn't ever want anyone to suffer, so we're gonna take our wine and not enjoy it all.
exactly, like the taking out the wine,
Yeah.
diminishing the joy of the full cup of wine with the plate.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a class. That is not, there's no expression of remorse in the straight reading of the Torah.
Yeah.
Right? That is like an addition, that is part of this kind of orientation of the rabbis that we're gonna bring out here in this session. Yes, that's exactly it. Anything else from what people have heard? There's a famous midrash that you might have heard, that is also connected with this time, the 7th day of Pesach. The Torah reading for that day is the splitting of the sea, Shirat Hayam. right, the song, Shirat Hayam means literally the song of the sea. So it's reading that whole, right, because we leave Egypt on the first night of Pesach, and it takes us a little while to walk, and so now we've got, by the seventh, I think the way the rabbis imagine it is the night of the seventh day, we're like walking through the mud of the sea, right? So there's the famous midrash that when the Egyptians were drowning in the sea, the angels began to sing. And God silences the angels and says, don't be quiet, don't sing. My handiwork is drowning in the sea. Right? So
Don't celebrate.
don't celebrate, like, stop singing, stop your celebratory singing, angels. The Egyptians are also I created the Egyptians and they're drowning. That layer is not there in the biblical text. The biblical text is, if you ever haven't, like, if you've never, it's worth like looking at a regular translation of the Song of the Sea. It's pretty much like, there's one of the lines is like, you drowned them and they sunk like a stone. It's like, yay, like they totally went down. We kicked their ass, like that's the kind of straight biblical theology.
What's that, when you're talking about rabbinic theology and compassionate, but even within that, the much more orthodox rabbis, are they still in that camp even now or not necessarily?
Well, I
Without
mean,
going into-
obviously there's, a
'Cause
lot
my
of,
grandfather was Orthodox and he was very harsh,
well,
not harsh like
yeah.
physically, but about God.
Yes, so there's certainly many who still were, and in a lot of Orthodoxy became somewhat more strict and rigid when traditional Judaism met the modern world in the early 1800s. It caused like more of a backlash and for people to become more strict, and so now we can't wear colored clothing anymore. We can only wear black because that's what we wore in 1783, and so we have to keep wearing what we wore in 1783 until for the next 3,000 years or whatever, like, even though, and so it kind of forced this rigidity, but also, look, I mean, you had to, Reconstructionism and Reform and the other kinds of modern expressions of Judaism are also reacting against some of that strictness. But the kind of point is, and that we'll see, is that I think that this more, there's certainly a lot of like harsh stuff that the rabbis still say,
Okay,
but there's also this real more compassionate orientation that they
Okay.
bring in. And so the first one that I want to bring to you, how are we doing? Okay, we're doing good on time, is our first text. So this is going to start with one of the other great, right? We at the burning bush, we saw one of the first great divine revealings of God's self. Mysterious and wondrous kind of revealings to Moses. This is one of the next great ones that we could do a whole session on, but we're just going to kind of focus in on one kind of main aspect of it as we compare it to a rabbinic rendering of it. So this first text, Exodus 34, 4-7, right? Everyone is there. So this comes right after the golden calf episode, right? Do people know that in the Torah? Yeah, okay. Right after Sinai, everyone's all at this, elated experience, and then people make the golden calf, and while Moses is up on the mountain, and he comes down and he's enraged seeing people making this idol that Aaron facilitated and so forth, and so they destroy the calf, and there's other kinds of violence and so forth, but Moses wins kind of forgiveness for the people, and then he goes back up the mountain. And then that's where that's where the tiny bit, the abbreviated background for where this text comes in. So maybe someone who hasn't read yet, want to read the English? And again, when you come to the Yud Hey Vav Hey, you can say Yud Hey Vav Hey, Adonai, Hashem, Havaya, you could say. I don't want to explain that right now, if you know that. Right, okay.
So Moses carved 2 tablets of stone, like the first, and early in the morning he went up to Mount Sinai,
Went up on Mount Sinai,
as Hashem had commanded him, taking the 2 stone tablets with him. Hashem came down in a cloud and stood with him there, proclaiming the name. Adonai, Adonai, passed before him and proclaimed, Adonai, Adonai, a God compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in kindness and faithfulness, extending kindness to the 1000th generation, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin, yet not remitting all punishment, but visiting the iniquity of parents upon children and children's children, upon the 3rd and 4th generation.
Okay. So hold that there in your mind, that text. And now we're going to compare that with this next text, which comes from the Machzor, from the High Holiday Prayer Book, from the Slichot service, so that I think we pretty much do this whole text at Oseh. So like on Yom Kippur evening, as part of the Mariv service, we do this, and then also on Yom Kippur day as well. Someone else able to read this one?
Sure. I'll try. Adonai passed before him and proclaimed, Adonai, Adonai, a God compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in kindness and faithfulness, extending kindness to the thousandth generation, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin, and pardon our iniquity and our sin, and take us for your inheritance. Pardon us, our Creator, for we have sinned. Forgive us, our Sovereign, for we have transgressed.
Okay. So what do you notice is like the basic differences with these 2 texts?
He
What's
didn't, he didn't punish the 3rd generation.
Cursing it forever.
Yes, the whole thing about this whole line, yet not remitting all punishment, but visiting the iniquity of the parents upon the children of 3rd and 4th generations, is not there in that text. Why not? It's a little harsh.
Is this second text from Deuteronomy?
No, the second text is straight out of the Machzor,
Oh,
is out of the prayer book.
Yeah.
So the second text is what the rabbis wanted us to pray as we ask for forgiveness.
Yeah, well, at least you'll get forgiveness with this prayer.
Yeah, right, but the other one, it sounds like there is a,
It's a lot more palatable, I mean, and I would imagine they're, you know, in the business of making sure that people stick around and so the new people come, and so if you were to paint a God, picture of God, the other one is not gonna. have
right,
many
so,
followers.
right, so if we
Messing
could
with
go
your
back to,
grandchildren.
Yeah,
what was it?
Messing with your grandchildren and
Great
great grandchildren.
Right, so maybe if we could go back to those early rabbinic services 2,000 years ago, and they're like, you know, I don't know why people keep leaving. Is it-
running away.
I don't know, you know, maybe we should try editing the text a little bit. And that's exactly what they did.
Yeah.
They locked off. Is this new to people? Some people, I actually talked about this in a Yom Kippur sermon a few years ago, but okay, good, because this is a great thing to know. They locked off the whole end of that verse. They cut and pasted it into the liturgy, but they chopped off that whole end piece. And then, and then they added these other lines, these are, I think that's actually the pardon our iniquity, our transgression and our sin, and take us for your inheritance. I think that's also another biblical quote. I forget from where, but then the salach lanu, right? When we say salach lanu, mechal lanu, kaper la. So that's that last line, pardon us, our creator. That's the salach lanu, avinu, literally our father, hi chatanu. So then the rabbis wrote that last line. So this was a fairly radical thing to do, that we don't have access to those rabbinic conversations. I've never seen anything or been able to, I haven't tried super hard, but I don't think anything is alluded to of like why they did it, or they just, they would take license with the text to put forward the theology that they believed in, really.
So I just want to make sure I'm understanding
Yeah.
something now. If you were reading the Torah, though, you're reading the full 4 through 7. They didn't change the Torah text. You're saying
Yeah.
in Sidurs and Chumash and other prayer, other whatever they're called, document, liturgy, whatever. That's where
The Siddur and the
the
Machzor,
changes would be seen.
right,
The Machzor, yeah.
right, so in
Okay,
the
okay.
Torah, right, so well, let's just look at this. So it's in, now there are in verse, on the first page in the Exodus text, in verse Vav,
Yeah, 7, right.
but if you look in the Hebrew,
Uh-huh.
so so it says Vayavor Adonai al panav vayikra. And so then, so I'm starting here. So that's the Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'chanun, Erech Apayim, Derav Chesed v'emet, Notzer Chesed le'alafim, Nose Avon v'fesha v'chata v'nakeh. And the rabbis put the period there. They put a period there. And well, first, yeah, they put a period there, and then they lifted that, what I just chanted, and they put that in the Machzor
Oh.
and in the Siddur. But the actual Torah, but the Torah text goes on to say, Lo Yenakeh, Poked Avod, will will not cleanse or remit all punishment, but will visit the iniquity of parents upon the children and children generation. Right?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So that stayed in the Torah first, but then so I want us to just, see that, and this is similar to what Reconstructionism has done with making liturgical changes that we've had, where we took out things like chosenness, which was a regular, central part of the liturgy. But you could argue, like, the rabbis did radical things with the with the raw materials that they received from the Torah, and this is one of the more radical things that they did. Does this all make sense? Yeah. I do want to just say to the biblical verses credit, like people have pointed out, that we can also understand this as the way, certain things like now what we know about epigenetics and things like trauma, things like alcoholism, actually, things that your great grandparent, yeah, right, things actually, struggles that your great grandparents had, they actually can get passed
Yeah.
down, so there's like a kind of beneath or within the harshness, the harshness that kind of strikes us at the first reading, there is, I think, a deeper level of truth in the biblical verse. But thankfully, the rabbis realized that if you really want to do better outreach, we should probably cut that off.
The Chamber of Commerce version.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we're gonna save our next text. Yeah, I think we'll save our next text, because I want to give you a little bit of time for some reflection. Is if we do the next text, we want to time for that. And so we'll do the next two texts next time. So if you have if you have your journal, or hopefully you have something to write in, because part of what Rabbi Dari and I are trying to do with this class over its many months is support you all in tracking your experience over the process of this class in a reflective and non-judgmental way. And so as part of that, before we kind of like get straight into the mental level, the experiences that we have often begin at an earlier, like unconscious, subtle level of sensation and feelings, and many of us are not encouraged to pay attention to that. Some of us maybe have that capacity, some of us less so. But there's a lot that can be learned by being able to kind of notice just our own inner experience. So I just wanted you to take a moment to notice how you're feeling right now. Like, just kind of take a read inside your body. And if you can, you can include our session from what we've learned. There's a lot of different stuff we've done today. You can certainly, just focus on, right now. Maybe there's physical sensations, but if You know, there's the emotional level of excited, confused, nervous, you know, whatever it is, just a kind of openness and curiosity and noticing that. And even if you don't feel anything in particular, you can just kind of sense in more for something more subtle, or even just like feeling, "Oh, I don't really feel anything." That's okay too. That's perfectly good information. So you could kind of, you know, maybe note in your reflect for a few moments of how you're feeling, what you're noticing on that subtle feeling level. And then when you've kind of captured that at a basic level, just, you know, to reflect, you know, we'll take 5 minutes or so. What strikes you from what we've talked about today? What's present for you? What's stirring? What sticks from the different things we've talked about this time, or if there was something that you didn't get to write about that is still with you from last time. These different theological reflections and so yeah, so this is just your own time to reflect. The gift of several minutes. You don't have to go anywhere or do anything else, but notice what's present for you. And right, I'm Deb, if you know, you're driving, so you can do your reflection later. I think we'll probably just close after this. And so you don't have to stay on, our online folks, you don't have to stay on. You're certainly welcome to. But we'll be back again in 2 weeks, so bring back your source sheets. Because we'll do these other two texts from the Talmud.
The thing we're gonna use today.
But we'll have a few more minutes here for those folks in the room to reflect. Just take another minute. I mean, if you certainly don't have to share anything, the reflection is primarily for your own purposes, but if anyone would like to share anything that came to them as they reflected, or if there's further questions or comments about what we talked about, I'd love to, if there are people who haven't spoken much today, if there's any last words you'd like to offer, things you notice.
I have a couple of very Orthodox friends. And one's studying to be a rabbi, but they are both in the very Orthodox tradition and he's somewhat of an authority, both of them. And I'm reading this and saying, well, maybe the dicta that they're reading is not the only way to do things. Maybe there is a kinder, gentler way of interpreting things
Mhm. Mhm.
without making it illegitimate.
Yeah, yeah. Or at least that, certainly the rabbis did their own kind of radical things. And maybe Orthodox people would say, well, those were the holy early
But it can
rabbis,
still
but they were just people, right? It's still, exactly, it still can evolve. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is, and I mean, that's, Reconstructionism famously defines itself as, the, have like being interested in the evolving religious civilization of the Jewish people, right? That it's not from like a really Orthodox perspective, it's not evolving. This was all, we're just doing it like God said on Sinai and so forth, down to the, black hats and everything, or I don't know how they, rationalize those exactly, but this whole evolutionary quality is an important part of Reconstructionism, and and other liberal Jewish movements lift this up as well. But that's,
And it's not illegitimate.
yeah, no, it's
There you go.
the tradition has absolutely evolved and changed, and that evolution and change is even connected. You could make a nice drosh out of God's name that we studied for the first chunk of time. Any other last word? It keeps looking like you're going to say something, Sophia.
Yeah. This is like the fourth class at course we take about the same subject.
Oh, okay.
It was in seminary. I taken a Union Reformed Judaism course, the Miller program, and this one. So I have 4 different perspectives for the same thing.
Okay.
And everyone required me to write a journal reflecting. So,
And each one of them had you writing a journal reflecting?
yeah, that's great. So,
Okay. Well, sorry, you're very advanced.
Reflecting.
Hopefully, I probably didn't get to learn these 2 rabbinic texts that we're gonna look at next time, and
and then I will add the seminary courses. I basically spend my whole day reflecting constantly
yeah,
because seminary basically just one big reflection.
yeah, yeah, we get to do a lot of that, yeah.
So that's gonna make me gonna laugh, go back to journaling, reflect. Okay, I'm gonna reflect about reflecting.
Or you could journal about something else entirely. Or you could work on Hebrew, or, you know. Okay, well, great, well, we can hold there.